If you have a really great name that you use in your business, maybe it's a name you use for the whole of your business, your brand, or maybe a specific product or service, and you would hate it if you could no longer use that name, or if someone else started using it, and you've got a nagging feeling that you aren't doing as much as you could do, or maybe even anything at all to protect that name, you are in the right place, because in this video, I'm going to be going through my top tips for registering a trademark. Now, trademarks are all about names. So let's just get a little bit of clarity around that at the start. If you're looking to protect your content, then you need to be thinking about copyright, and I did a video earlier on about that. But if you want to protect your name and or your logo, then we are looking at trademarks. Okay, so let's start with the process for registering your trademark. Now, I really recommend something called the Right Start application in the UK, and you complete that application by filling in an online form. It's actually a really simple form. So the first thing I want to say about all of that is, don't think that you necessarily have to use a lawyer, go to a trademark attorney, for example, or some other kind of professional agent, because in my experience, it really is something that you can do yourself. And I've helped hundreds of my clients kind of held their hand through the process. It's something you can do for yourself. Now, of course, you might decide that life is too short, you haven't got enough time, and you want to pay someone to do it, and that's fine. But the process is not that complicated. So you go to the .gov.uk, the official Intellectual Property Office website, and you go to the section on registering a trademark. And I want you to choose the Right Start application. Now, at the time of making this video, it's £200 for a Right Start application. What I like about this type of application is it's only a little bit more than the other type of application, about £30 more, but you pay half of the fee up front, and the trademark office looks at your form when you send it in. So they look at your form at the point when you've only paid half of the fee, and they give a report back to you. They let you know if they foresee any problems with your application, and also if they think there's someone who's got a similar trademark already, who they are going to notify and let them know. And that just buys you a bit of thinking time. You can consider the response before you decide whether or not you're going to go ahead to the next stage, at which point you pay the rest of the fee. So the Right Start application starts with you filling in that form. You get the report back from the IPO, you decide if you're going to the next stage, and you pay the second half of the fee. And then at that point, it gets published, your application gets published in the Trademark Journal. And it also at that point appears on the Trademark Register. It becomes a matter of public record. The Trademark Register is a public register. So if anyone were to look up the trademark at that stage, the words and or logo that you are registering, have applied to register, then your trademark application would show up. The great thing about that is, you've already made a mark in the sand, if you like. If someone comes after that point and wants to register the same trademark, you get priority because you've already put in an application. So the sooner you get started with all of this, the better. It then takes, so that first stage, by the way, probably takes a couple of weeks. So that's quite a quick stage. The next stage takes longer, and I would always tell you that you should allow for 3 to 4 months from the start of making your application to the point where you get your registration certificate. So that second stage, where it's published in the Trademark Journal, goes on for a longer period of time. That really is a couple of months, and longer still if somebody informs the IPO that they intend to object to your application. So about 3 to 4 months for the whole process. Now we're going to look at whether or not you should just apply for the words. If you're registering a name, should you just apply for the words to be registered as a trademark, or should you go for the words and a logo combined? Well, my advice on that is, in general, I prefer for my clients to apply just for the words. And the reason for that is that gives you wider protection. If you apply for the words and logo combined, you're only going to get protection for those two things together. And what we really want to be able to do is to stop anyone else using the name at all, no matter how they make it look. So the way to get the best protection is to apply just for the words themselves. What I want to talk about now is avoiding a trademark registration that is just purely descriptive. So what I mean by that is, if you have a name which is a bit of a Ronseal kind of name, so it just does what it says on the tin, it just describes what you do, in many instances you won't be able to register that as a trademark. So there's an example I always give of this, which is if you were Steve Jobs and you wanted to apply to register the Apple shop as a trademark, and Steve Jobs was a fruit seller, a greengrocer, then that likely would not be able to be registered as a trademark. It probably would get rejected by the IPO. And the reason for that is it's describing what you're selling in your shop. And so as a matter of policy, it's just not fair that you try and get a monopoly on using that name. But if you're Steve Jobs and you apply to register the Apple shop to sell computers for an IT kind of shop, well then that's fine, that's going to get registered because it's not describing what you're doing in the shop. So if you have a name which is purely descriptive of what you're doing, then it's less likely that you're going to get it registered, that you'll be able to get a trademark registration. That doesn't mean that you can't use the name, it just means that you won't be able to register the trademark. You might be able to still use the letters TM, which means an unregistered trademark, and I've done a video about that topic. My last video was about that topic, so you can have a look at that video if you want to find out more about unregistered trademarks. The next thing I want to look at is how you decide which class you register your name against. So you register your name against classes of products or services. So there's a whole list, and they're all numbered, of products and services separated out into classes. Now when you look at those classes, sometimes there are some really kind of strange combinations of things together in the same classes, so just be warned about that. And I would say that this is one of the trickiest bits of your application, so be prepared to spend a bit of time looking into that. But again, the IPO website is really useful, and they've got a whole section where you can search for different things, and it will help you to understand which class you need to use to protect your the name for that product or service. Now, when you start looking at the classes, you'll see that there is a lot of repetition in there. And I don't want you to think that you have to capture every single little variation of what you're doing. So the approach that I recommend for this is, say we're looking at class 41. So class 41 is one of the main classes that interests my clients, and that's the coaching and training and education and consultancy type of class. So that's class 41. There will be loads of different ways of saying online training in that class. So it might say training online. It might say training brackets online. It might say online training, kind of different, very small variations of the same thing will be in there. And my advice is always go for a kind of the most obvious, wide version of what you're doing. So go for training, and then look at different variations of that which are relevant to what you do. So it might be online training as well, for example, but just go for one version of that. So just go for online training, and then you don't need to worry about training brackets online and so on. So that's my recommendation on how to deal with that, but it will take a little bit of time, and it's an art rather than a science, so just be prepared for that. The next topic I want to look at is what happens if someone objects to your trademark application. Be prepared that this might well happen. I do hundreds of applications for my clients, and I would say this comes up maybe a third of the time. So sometimes someone will get in touch with you and they'll say, look, I have got a very similar trademark in the same class, and I'm worried it's going to cause confusion with potential customers. If that happens, very often it can get resolved. So my first bit of advice is don't panic. And again, this can be it's an emotional topic. It's amazing how many of these legal points can feel really emotional, but you can often sort it out in correspondence. And one of the ways that we can do this is perhaps you might need to specify a particular sector or type of person or type of business that you help, that is your customer. So for example, you might say online training, coaching and consultancy, all in relation to women and careers, for example. So you might specify the area that you specialize in, just to differentiate what you're doing from the other person. That often will sort it all out. I'm going to leave it there because I don't want to overwhelm you, but those are some of my top tips for making sure that the trademark application process is as seamless and full of ease as possible. Good luck with that. Let me know how you get on. See you soon.